my whole job here is to help them be successful. So their success is my success. When it comes to sales leadership, I think there's a few things that come to mind first and foremost. One is that I try to be extremely transparent with my team and try to always kind of let them know what my goals are and how they're corresponding to their goals. And the thing that I often hear me say, and I hope when they hear this, they back me up on this, that I tell them my whole job here is to help them be successful. So their success is my success. So I want them to know I'm behind them 100%. If I'm asking them to do something, if I'm pushing them in a certain direction, it's because I want them to be successful because our incentives are 100% aligned. So that's kind of the first thing that I try to lead with is we're all in this together. Their success is my success, and there's no conflicting incentives here by any stretch. So that's the first thing. I think the other thing too is that I try to lean on my experience, having done the job myself. I think sometimes when people who haven't been in the seat try to step in and manage and lead, it can be difficult for them to really understand kind of what they're up against. Not to say that it's impossible, but for me, I just like to say, I've been in your shoes. I know that what we're doing is not so fun, but we have to do it anyway. Or no, it isn't that bad. I've been in your shoes. We can do this. There's different kind of ways to approach in that way. So again, just try to be really transparent with them and also lean on my experience. I think is the two things I try and lead with the most, I'd say.
Yeah, that's great. I think it really puts people at rest when they know that you've also been in that situation, because it's just using empathy in those situations makes you feel a bit less scared. So talking about sales reps and things like that, what is a player to you? Like what is a primary example of a sales rep to you?
Sure. So I think when I think of an A player, I think of somebody who knows how to be present and knows how to be kind of on top of their game. And when it comes to working in sales, it impacts, and in my experience, a lot of companies, there's so much of it that's kind of that you see and that you don't see, in terms of when a sales rep shows up to a sales call, they're prepared, they're confident, they're calm, they're projecting a sense of what we talk about a lot is empathy and authority. They're able to talk to somebody and know that they can understand where they're coming from, but also come off as saying, I'm an expert, you should listen to me when I push you in one direction or the other. So there's that when you're on the sales calls. And then there's a whole bunch of time that you don't see them. It's probably, I don't know, at least half the time, if not more, that they're just either prospecting, finding appointments, collaborating with people internally. And I think that's the type of thing that when I think of an A player, that's a huge aspect of what I think of as somebody that is somebody who's good to work with. I think salespeople often have not the greatest reputation at certain companies for being difficult or being just only concerned about their own sales goals or something. And a good team player is going to close more deals. They're going to get the support of subject matter expert or a collaborator from a different team that's going to help them be more successful, and that is just good for everybody in the end.
Right. Yeah, great. So in that situation, then, if you've got sort of a sales rep that is an A player to you, how do you compare that to a B player? So what does a B player look like, and what are those main distinctive differences between the two?
Yeah, I think that an A player versus a B player, I think a B player might be lacking in certain areas, whether that's team collaboration, but also self-awareness, I think is a huge thing for sales reps. And I think it's, a lot of these things you could say about anybody in any position, but I think in sales it's especially important that if you're not aware of where you're succeeding and where you're failing on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis, then you're going to really struggle, because you're not going to be able to course correct, and you're not going to be able to push yourself to improve and do better, essentially. So I think a B player might struggle in, I'd say, kind of showing up to sales calls and being authoritative and being able to kind of come off as somebody who needs to be respected and needs to be kind of adding value to a conversation when they engage with a prospect. I think the thing that we try and focus on the most is we actually call our sales reps advisors as kind of their title. And so if you're not able to, either you just lacking the experience or lacking the kind of know how to actually be able to add value in a sales conversation, or if you have the experience, but you're just not able to think on your feet and able to kind of ask good questions, then that's something that a B player might struggle with.
Okay, great. So there are some of the weaknesses that you sort of recognize, and that's what distinguishes between a B and an A. So how do you then, say if you've got a sales team, how do you distinguish between it being the fault of the individual or this sales team? You're just saying how a lot of it can be collaboration between sales team members. How, as a leader, do you recognize the difference between an individual and a team issue?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say ultimately it's the individual's responsibility to kind of produce results. I think that's one thing that I really love about working in sales is it's very black and white. I've worn a few different hats throughout my career. I've been a consultant, I've been a marketer, I've been a sales rep, now a sales leader. And I think that I always struggled when I was, especially in consulting, you're kind of in this fuzzy, intangible world where you don't really know exactly the value that you're providing. And it's really hard to quantify that. Whereas in sales, it's pretty black and white. Like either the numbers are there or they're not, and there's a lot of things that could get in your way. And it's certainly important to talk about, well, I would have been successful if, marketing did their job, or if, I was better prepared and, I didn't know this was going to happen. Or there's always excuses for why things didn't happen. And some of them are more legit than others. But at the end of the day, individuals are responsible for producing results. And if they're not able to produce those results, they have to kind of navigate the internal politics to get in a position where they can produce them, essentially. So ultimately, it's down to the individual, in my opinion. I think a good sales leader will identify the things that are big picture, kind of standing in the way of their sales team, and yell and scream at whoever needs to hear it to kind of say, hey, our sales team can't succeed unless we do this. And that's what I spend at least some of my time doing. But I think at the end of the day, though, it's individuals are responsible for their own destiny. And I think that's something I love about sales. I think that's what attracts a lot of people to it, is that if you work hard, you produce results, you can be rewarded. That's what it's all about at the end of the day.
That's great. So if you think it's down to the individual and sort of developing the individual themselves, do you ever take guidance from the A class reps that you were talking about, sort of seeing what's working tactic wise and then trying to reciprocate that in others? Or is your coaching style sort of more personalized and working on an individual?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're a small team. There's only 3 reps on my team. And so there's one person on my team, her name is Melissa, who's kind of our senior account executive. That's her title. And it's actually before I became sales director, that's the title I asked for in my position, to kind of say, hey, I was working on getting that promotion to director. And I said, I want to be kind of like a player coach. I want to take on more responsibility of offering feedback in specific areas. And I want to be designated as that person who you kind of have to listen to, and not just say, I'll take the responsibility of providing good feedback if you tell me you're going to listen to it. And so when I became sales director, we moved Melissa into that kind of senior account executive role. And I absolutely go to her all the time for things about, hey, I'm struggling with this. What do you think? I want your opinion. And I kind of seek her out for a lot of things. Not that I don't talk to other people on the team for feedback as well, but she's kind of earned the right to kind of give me that, perspective as our most successful person, our, person who has a lot of experience and has a lot of perspective that's really useful. So I'd really be, as a leader, I'd be really stupid not to kind of, take her advice and take her perspective into account. So I try to do that as much as I can.
Yeah, I guess it's good because sort of having that approach to things, it gives you more of an insight, doesn't it, when you can't have eyes everywhere. And I feel like with sales, a lot of it is sometimes trial and error. So if you're getting positive results, it's sometimes good to hear it from the horse's mouth. So what's the best way that you sort of cross-pollinate her? Because obviously she's how do you sort of cross-pollinate from her really good attributes into the rest of your reps?
Mm-hmm. We put a big emphasis on listening to call recordings, and we actually just recently started using a conversation intelligence tool to basically kind of get a lot of insights from our calls to say, okay, this is what we learned from this situation. Let's really draw out this insight and apply it somewhere else. We try to do at least a little bit of role playing in our training, and which everybody always loves, of course. But it's I think it's really important, though, to kind of not just, kind of go through the motions, but to really be aware of what we're doing and really focus in on specific insights. Yeah. And then I try not to only use, my my top person or top people to kind of say, okay, this is the person that we're going to model everything after. There's a really great book called the Sales Acceleration Formula by Marc, who was the sales leader at HubSpot in their early days. And he talks in his book about actually how it's a really bad idea to take your top reps and have everybody just model after them, because everybody's sales superpower is different in that, some people are really good relationship builders, other people are really good with technical and product knowledge. And if you just say, well, this person's succeeding, so everybody do what they're doing, that's actually not a recipe for success. So, I think basically I try to just, the way I like to kind of think about solving problems for the team is to give people as much information as they can and have them kind of use their brains essentially and kind of think through things. So when this situation happens, let's take this approach, and kind of like, how would you handle this if you were faced with that situation? And that's kind of what I try to do by using call recordings and insights from calls to draw that out.
Okay. So one thing that's really interesting about you was your inbound talk, and that presentation was really great. Do you think that sort of mental health and positivity and sort of having a good positive approach really impacts your sales reps and even you as a leader on a day-to-day?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's huge. I think, again, this is something that's universal for, for pretty much anybody. I think that, so the talk you're referencing was referencing an experience I had coming up on about 10 years ago, I'd say at this point, when I was injured in a rock climbing accident, and used a lot of mindfulness and yoga and kind of like positive thinking to kind of get through that whole experience and then have a recovery and kind of change my perspective on a moving forward basis. And I think you've talked to a lot of people, it was a pretty serious injury that I had. It was actually life-threatening. I'm lucky to be alive. And whenever I talk about this, I always say, we're all lucky to be alive, like we're all lucky to take life in as a gift, and to not take that for granted. So just quick plug for just, being in the moment and, that sort of thing. But as it pertains to sales, absolutely. I think something that we actually take time in our weekly huddles, that we often start with like a quick 5-minute meditation session. And I really like to do that because it just gets everybody in a state of mind where, we're kind of racing and running from, one thing to the other. And then we take a minute just to ground ourselves. And then we have a much more productive conversation as a result of that. And it's something that obviously you can't start every sales call with a meditation. You could try. I don't know. Certain people will be into it more than others, I guess. But what you can do is just take at least one mindful breath, and you could just ground yourself in the moment and just say, okay, I'm going to be fully present for this conversation. And if you do that, you're going to have much, much higher chances of success, I would say. I think a lot of times salespeople struggle with, man, I really need this deal. I'm so stressed out about, being behind on my goals or whatever it is. And if you let that anxiety and that fear kind of get into your emotion and your voice during the sales call, it's not going to help you close the deal. It's not going to help you in the long run.
Yeah.
So I think the more that you can just be in the moment, and the easiest thing to do in the world is to breathe. It's something that we're all doing. If we're alive, we're breathing. So you can't breathe in the past, you can't breathe in the future. You can only breathe in the present moment. So it's a great tool.
Yeah, I feel like that's a very simple thing that sometimes when it's such a high pressure environment like sales, people forget to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
So sometimes after a sales call, you have to be like, okay.
Right.
So I'm just going to do the last question now. So if you were in a room of the best sales leaders, what would you ask them?
That's a good question. I would say, I think a lot of the time, you've asked me a few good questions today that I might repeat actually, in terms of taking people that realizing what their potential is and helping them realize it, I think is the number one thing that sales leaders can do. I think hiring and building the team is critical to being successful in a leadership position, getting the right people on your team and identifying the right characteristics to hire for. But I think, for myself, I became a director after the team was already in place. I didn't actually hire any of the people that were on my team. They were kind of given to me. And it's my job to get the most out of them, not to say, oh, I need to fire everybody and start new. That's the only way I'm going to be successful. Like, obviously, that would be very cruel to the people on my team, and it would also not be viable for the business, So I feel like a lot of people are often put in the position where you're given a set of resources, you have to maximize their potential in terms of people. And that would be my number one question to sales leaders is, how do you unlock the potential that's in everybody? Because if you can get your team performing at its maximum capacity, then you're going to produce good results, even if you're not working with much, essentially. Like that's really, and then when you do get somebody who's really good, you get them operating at full capacity, then you can really do amazing stuff. So
that's great. Thank you so much for taking time to interview. It's been really great. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.